Captain Aiden Shaw leaned against the bar of the galactic outpost, his drink catching faint reflections of the neon lights as he scanned the room, his gaze sharp with an almost predatory curiosity. The dimly lit establishment, tucked into a forgotten corner of the Morvex 7 station, was filled with the hum of alien conversations and the clinking of glasses. Aiden had spent years hopping between outposts, smuggling goods, ferrying passengers, and occasionally dabbling in galactic diplomacy. Tonight, though, he sought nothing more than a quiet drink and a distraction from the monotony of hyperspace jumps. His eyes drifted to the far side of the room, where an unusually tall figure captured his attention. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver under the bar's dim neon lights, shifting subtly with every movement she made. She was Xy'thari, unmistakably so, with elongated, glowing eyes that scanned the room with an air of disinterest. Aiden had encountered a few Xy'thari during his travels, but none quite like this one. She exuded an aura of authority that even her relaxed posture couldn't disguise. He took another sip of his drink and decided to test his luck. Setting his glass on the bar, he navigated through the bustling crowd, drawn to the Xy'thari woman whose presence seemed to ripple with an enigmatic magnetism, her every motion commanding subtle respect. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, flashing a smile he'd honed over years of disarming hostile negotiations and charming his way out of tight spots. The woman's glowing eyes fixed on him, unblinking. "If you're brave enough to try," she replied, her voice smooth and melodic but carrying an edge of challenge. Aiden slid into the seat across from her, gesturing to the bartender for another drink. "Captain Aiden Shaw, smuggler, negotiator, occasional hero. And you are?" "Elyara," she said simply, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Xy'thari emissary." Aiden's eyebrows lifted. "Emissary, ha." Didn't think Morvex 7 was a hotspot for high-level diplomacy. "It's not," she said, leaning back in her chair. "But it's a useful place to observe humanity." "Ah, so we're under observation now," Aiden said, feigning offense. "Tell me, what have you learned?" Elyara tilted her head, her shimmering features catching the light as she regarded him with measured curiosity, her expression hinting at a blend of amusement and calculation. "You're a paradox. Primitive yet inventive, reckless yet resourceful. Your kind defies logic in fascinating ways." "I'll take that as a compliment," Aiden said with a grin. "So, what brings a fascinating Xy'thari like you to a dingy outpost like this?" Elyara's expression remained unreadable as she reached into a small pouch at her side and withdrew a device that looked like a metallic sphere, its surface rippling with iridescent light. She placed it on the table between them. "Curiosity. And an experiment." Aiden leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "A test," Elyara said, her gaze steady. "Of strength, will, and creativity." "Sounds intriguing. What's the catch?" "The catch is whether you're brave enough to engage," Elyara said, her tone carrying a hint of challenge. "You've got my attention," Aiden said. "What do I have to do?" Elyara's smile deepened slightly. She tapped the sphere, and it floated a few inches above the table, its glow intensifying. "Move it," she said. "No hands. No tools. Just your mind." Aiden's smirk faltered. "Wait, are you saying telekinesis?" "Call it what you will," Elyara said, leaning back in her chair. "But humans have a tendency to surprise, even when they lack the abilities of other species. Consider this an opportunity to demonstrate your uniqueness." Aiden stared at the sphere, then back at Elyara. "All right, let's see what I can do." He closed his eyes, focusing his thoughts on the sphere. Nothing happened. He tried again, gritting his teeth and concentrating harder. Still, the sphere remained motionless. Elyara watched him with a mix of amusement and curiosity. "You're approaching this like a problem to be solved with brute force," she said. "Perhaps try a different perspective." Aiden opened his eyes, letting out a frustrated breath. "Care to give me a hint?" "Think less about the sphere," Elyara said, "and more about the energy around it. Imagine the connections, the currents, the possibilities." Aiden frowned, but he took a deep breath and tried again. This time, he didn't focus solely on the sphere. Instead, he let his mind wander, imagining the space around it, the subtle movements of air, the energy flowing through the room. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the sphere began to wobble. Elyara's eyes brightened. "Interesting," she murmured. Encouraged, Aiden concentrated on the sensation of connection rather than control. The sphere lifted higher, its glow intensifying. "Not bad," Elyara said, her tone hinting at genuine approval. "Perhaps there's more to humanity than meets the eye." Before Aiden could respond, a sudden explosion rattled the station, a deafening roar accompanied by the acrid scent of burning metal and the faint tremor of collapsing infrastructure, sending him sprawling from his seat as alarms blared. Alarms blared, and the room descended into chaos as patrons scrambled for cover. Elyara was already on her feet, her calm demeanor replaced with urgency. "What the hell was that?" Aiden shouted over the noise. "An attack," Elyara said, her glowing eyes scanning the room. "Slithix raiders. They must have breached the station's defenses." Aiden's heart sank. Slithix raiders were notorious for their brutality, leaving no survivors in their wake. He'd encountered them once before and barely escaped with his life. "We need to move," Elyara said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Follow me." Aiden didn't hesitate. Together, they pushed through the panicked crowd, dodging falling debris and the occasional blast of enemy fire. Elyara moved with precision and purpose, her every action calculated. Aiden couldn't help but admire her composure, even as the situation spiraled out of control. They reached a maintenance corridor, where Elyara stopped and activated a holographic map. "The docking bay is this way," she said. "Do you have a ship?" "The Valkyrie's Edge," Aiden said. "Docked in Bay 12. Elyara nodded, her voice firm yet calm, her glowing eyes narrowing with determination. "Good. Let's make haste, time is not on our side." As they made their way toward the docking bay, Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a random raid. The Slithix were brutal, but they were also calculated. Attacking a station like Morvex 7 seemed out of character. "Why would the Slithix hit this place?" he asked as they ran. "They're likely after something," Elyara said. "Or someone." Aiden glanced at her, suspicion creeping into his mind. "You think they're after you?" Elyara's expression remained unreadable. "It's a possibility." Aiden groaned. "Great. So much for a quiet night." They reached the docking bay just as the Slithix broke through the station's inner defenses. Aiden's ship loomed ahead, its sleek lines a welcome sight amid the chaos. He hit the remote unlock on his wrist, and the ramp lowered with a hiss. "Get inside," he said, ushering Elyara up the ramp. "I'll prep for takeoff." Elyara didn't argue, disappearing into the ship's interior. Aiden followed, sealing the hatch behind them. Moments later, he was in the cockpit, powering up the engines as Elyara took a seat beside him. "Hang on," Aiden said, gripping the controls. "This is going to get bumpy." With a deafening roar, the Valkyrie's Edge lifted off, weaving through the chaos as Slithix ships fired on the station. Aiden's hands flew over the controls, his instincts and years of experience guiding the ship through the hail of enemy fire. Elyara's gaze was fixed on the viewport, her expression calm but focused. "You're good at this," she said. "Comes with the territory," Aiden replied. "But don't get too comfortable. We're not out of this yet." As they broke free of the station's gravity, Aiden set a course for the nearest safe haven. But as the stars stretched into streaks of light, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Elyara's calm demeanor, the strange device she carried, and the sudden Slithix attack all pointed to a deeper mystery. And Aiden Shaw wasn't one to back down from a challenge. "All right, Elyara," he said, glancing at her. "Time to level with me. What aren't you telling me?" Her glowing eyes met his, and for a moment, she hesitated. Then, with a faint smile, she said, "Let's see how far your bravery really goes, Captain." As the Valkyrie's Edge hurtled through the void, the stars streaking past like pale scars on the fabric of space, Aiden Shaw kept one hand steady on the controls while his other clenched the edge of his seat, his knuckles white as tension crackled in the cockpit. His mind raced with scenarios, calculating escape routes and countermeasures. Elyara sat beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the viewport, the faint shimmer of her skin catching the light. Her fingers hovered over the console, her body tense yet fluid, like a coiled spring ready to release. They'd escaped the station, but the Slithix weren't known for letting their prey slip away so easily. Aiden could feel the weight of their pursuit pressing against the back of his mind like a storm waiting to break. "They're not giving up," Elyara said, her voice as steady as a blade's edge. "They never do," Aiden replied, flipping a series of switches on the console. The ship's engines hummed louder, a low, throaty growl that promised power but drained fuel at an alarming rate. "But I've gotten out of tighter spots than this." Elyara's lips twitched in what might have been a faint smile. "You're confident. That's good. But confidence without strategy is a gamble." Aiden shot her a sidelong glance. "You got a plan, emissary?" She leaned forward, her fingers brushing over the holographic display. "There's a nebula 2 parsecs from here. Its ionized gases will disrupt their sensors and give us a chance to lose them." "Not bad," Aiden said, adjusting their course. "But that's a lot of heat to fly through. My ship can handle it, but the Slithix might just blast us before we even get there." Elyara's gaze remained steady. "Then you'd better fly faster." The ship lurched as Aiden punched the engines, sending them hurtling toward the distant nebula. Behind them, the Slithix ships closed the gap, their sleek, predatory designs glinting in the starlight. The enemy's weapons lit up the void with bolts of searing plasma, each shot a deadly promise. Aiden wove through the barrage with practiced ease, his hands a blur on the controls. "Hold on," he muttered, his focus razor-sharp. The ship dipped and rolled, narrowly avoiding a plasma blast that streaked past the viewport like a fiery comet. Elyara's composure was unshaken. "Your instincts are remarkable, Captain. But instincts alone won't save us." "Don't worry," Aiden said, his grin as sharp as his maneuvers. "I've got plenty of tricks up my sleeve." The nebula loomed ahead, a mesmerizing tempest of swirling, iridescent hues that seemed alive with chaotic, crackling energy. The ship's controls flickered with interference, and a low hum resonated through the cockpit as if the nebula itself were reaching out. Aiden could feel the ship's systems straining as they approached, the sensors crackling with interference. The Slithix weren't deterred, their ships closing in like predators scenting blood. "We're almost there," Aiden said, his voice tight with concentration. "Just a little farther." A sudden jolt rocked the ship, a searing flash illuminating the cockpit as the acrid tang of overheated circuits filled the air. Aiden braced against the controls, his jaw tightening, while Elyara steadied herself with one hand, her gaze sharp and calculating. Warning lights flared on the console, and Aiden's heart skipped a beat. "Shields at 60%, Elyara reported calmly, her fingers flying over the controls. "We can't sustain another direct hit." "Then we won't take one," Aiden said, pushing the engines to their limit. The Valkyrie's edge plunged into the nebula, the vibrant gases swirling around them like a living thing. The ship's sensors flickered and failed, replaced by static and chaos. "We're flying blind," Aiden said, his grip tightening on the controls. "Let's hope this nebula does its job." Elyara's voice was calm but firm. "Trust your instincts, Captain. They've served you well so far." The ship twisted and turned through the nebula, its engines roaring against the pressure of the ionized gases. The Slithix ships followed, their weapons firing blindly into the swirling chaos. Aiden's hands moved with practiced precision, guiding the ship through the maelstrom as Elyara monitored their dwindling resources. "We're running low on fuel," she said. "If we don't lose them soon, we'll be stranded." "Not an option," Aiden said through gritted teeth. He pulled the ship into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding a collision with a dense cloud of charged particles. The Slithix ships weren't so lucky, one of them clipped the cloud and erupted in a fiery explosion. "One down," Aiden muttered. "Two to go." Elyara's eyes gleamed with something close to admiration. "You're resourceful, Captain. But this isn't over yet." Aiden's grin was brief but genuine. "Never is." As they neared the heart of the nebula, the ship's systems began to stabilize, the interference lessening. Aiden seized the opportunity to execute a risky maneuver, doubling back through the nebula's densest regions. The remaining Slithix ships hesitated, their sensors unable to track the Valkyrie's edge in the chaos. "Now," Aiden said, his voice low but determined. "Let's finish this." Elyara nodded, her fingers flying over the weapons console. She unleashed a burst of concentrated energy, targeting the Slithix ships as they emerged from the nebula's edge. The shots were precise, striking one ship's engines and sending it spiraling into the void. The last ship veered off, retreating into the distance. Aiden exhaled deeply, his hands finally relaxing on the controls. That'll teach them to mess with us. Elyara's gaze lingered on him, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly, as though weighing unspoken thoughts with careful precision. The faint curve of her lips suggested she was testing him, perhaps measuring his worth for something yet unspoken. You're more than I expected, Captain. Your resilience is impressive. Thanks, Aiden said, his grin returning. But don't think this means I'm not still wondering why the Slithix were after you in the first place. Elyara's lips curved into a faint smile. Perhaps it's time I showed you. She reached into her pouch and withdrew the metallic sphere, its surface shimmering with iridescent light. Placing it on the console, she tapped it gently, and the sphere projected a holographic map of the galaxy. Aiden's eyes widened as he took in the intricate details, the map's glowing lines forming pathways and symbols he didn't recognize. This is what they want, Elyara said. An artifact of my people. It contains knowledge and power that could shift the balance of the galaxy. In the wrong hands, it would be catastrophic. Aiden's jaw tightened. And you brought it to Morvex 7? Why? To keep it hidden, Elyara said. But it seems the Slithix discovered its location. Now, its safety depends on you. Aiden stared at the holographic map, his mind racing. The stakes had just risen to a level he hadn't anticipated. But as he looked at Elyara, her calm determination unwavering, he felt a spark of resolve. All right, he said, his voice steady. Let's make sure they don't get their hands on it. Elyara's smile deepened slightly. Good. Then let's begin. The cockpit of the Valkyrie's edge flashed with urgent lights and echoed with alarms, the acrid sting of overheating systems filling the air as the ship groaned under the strain of escape. Aiden Shaw's hands hovered over the controls, his mind running through every scenario he could think of to keep them alive. Elyara sat beside him, her glowing eyes locked on the holographic map, its shifting lines casting a faint, pulsing glow that seemed to echo the tension in the air. The energy in the room was palpable, as if the artifact itself resonated with the tension of their predicament. We can't stay adrift for long, Aiden said, breaking the heavy silence. The Slithix may have backed off, but they'll regroup and track us down. Elyara nodded, her expression unreadable. The artifact's map indicates a sanctuary, hidden deep within the Osprex sector. It's a place known only to my people. If we reach it, the Slithix won't follow. Aiden raised an eyebrow. Sanctuary sounds great, but the Osprex sector's crawling with ion storms and rogue asteroid fields. Even if we make it through, we'll be a sitting duck without more fuel. Elyara's fingers danced over the holographic display. There's an abandoned supply depot on the way. It's risky, but we can restock and make necessary repairs there. Risky sounds like my specialty, Aiden said with a lopsided grin, though his eyes betrayed the weight of their situation. Set the course. As the ship veered toward the depot's coordinates, Aiden couldn't help but notice Elyara's intense focus on the artifact. Its intricate holographic map shifted and pulsed with an otherworldly glow, and for a moment, it felt like the artifact was alive, responding to her touch. What is that thing, really? Aiden asked. You've been vague about it, but if it's valuable enough for the Slithix to chase us across the galaxy, I'd like to know what we're risking our necks for. Elyara's gaze flickered to him, her expression softer than usual. It's a relic of my people, containing knowledge and power beyond anything most species can comprehend. To the Slithix, it's a weapon. To us, it's a key to our survival. Survival from what? Aiden pressed, his tone sharper than he intended. She hesitated, her fingers pausing mid-air over the hologram. The Xy'thari are dying, Captain. Our numbers dwindle every cycle, our worlds fading into history. This artifact holds the secrets to reversing our decline. But in the wrong hands, it could accelerate our end, or worse, become a tool for domination. Aiden leaned back, absorbing her words. Heavy stuff, he muttered. No pressure, right? Elyara's lips curved into a faint smile, but the moment was fleeting. The ship shuddered slightly, a reminder of their precarious situation. "We're approaching the depot," Elyara said, her voice steady. "Scans show no activity, but we should proceed with caution." Aiden brought the ship in slow, the derelict depot coming into view. It was a massive, rusting structure, its skeletal framework silhouetted against the dim glow of a nearby star. The docking bay doors hung ajar, creaking faintly in the stale air. The flickering emergency lights cast distorted shadows over the rusted walls, and Aiden's hand instinctively tightened around his weapon. "Charming," Aiden said, guiding the Valkyrie's edge into the docking bay. "Let's hope there's enough juice left in this heap to refuel us." The ship settled with a hiss of hydraulics, and Aiden powered down the engines. He grabbed his sidearm from the console and glanced at Elyara. "Stay sharp. Abandoned doesn't always mean empty." Elyara nodded, retrieving a sleek weapon from her pouch. The two stepped into the docking bay, the air thick with the metallic tang of decay. Their footsteps echoed through the cavernous space as they moved cautiously toward the control room. "Looks like no one's home," Aiden said, his voice low. "Perhaps," Elyara replied, her glowing eyes scanning the shadows. "But something feels off." Before Aiden could respond, a low hum vibrated through the floor. The unnervingly organic sound was followed by a flicker of movement at the edge of his vision, sharpening his instincts to full alert. He spun, weapon raised, just as a hulking drone emerged from the shadows. Its chassis was battered and scarred, but its energy weapon glowed ominously as it trained on them. "Guess it's not as abandoned as we thought," Aiden said, firing a shot that ricocheted harmlessly off the drone's armor. Elyara reacted instantly, her weapon emitting a precise beam that struck the drone's sensor array. It staggered, sparks flying, but more drones emerged from the darkness, their heavy footsteps reverberating through the depot. "We're outnumbered," Elyara said, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to retreat." Aiden nodded, firing a few covering shots as they ducked behind a stack of rusted crates. "Any ideas?" Elyara's gaze darted to a terminal on the far wall, her expression sharpening with determination. "If I can access the control systems, I might be able to deactivate them," she said, her voice steady but her movements quick with urgency. "Might?" Aiden asked, his tone dry despite the situation. "Do you have a better plan?" Elyara countered, her glowing eyes narrowing. Aiden smirked. "Fair point. Cover me while I get you there." They moved as one, Aiden firing in controlled bursts while Elyara advanced toward the terminal. The drones closed in, their weapons churning out bursts of energy that scorched the walls around them. Aiden's heart pounded as he darted from cover to cover, his instincts keeping him one step ahead of the danger. Elyara reached the terminal and began working swiftly, her fingers flying over the ancient controls. "Keep them off me," she said, her tone clipped. "Working on it," Aiden replied, taking down a drone with a well-placed shot to its power core. But for every one he disabled, two more seemed to take its place. "Almost there," Elyara said, her voice steady despite the chaos. The terminal's screen flickered to life, lines of alien code scrolling rapidly as she bypassed the system's defenses. A drone loomed behind her, its weapon charging. Aiden didn't think, he acted, throwing himself between Elyara and the drone. The blast hit him squarely in the shoulder, sending him sprawling with a grunt of pain. "Aiden." Elyara's voice was sharp with alarm, but she didn't stop working. The terminal let out a high-pitched whine, and suddenly the drones froze, their weapons powering down. Elyara rushed to Aiden's side, her glowing eyes reflecting a rare vulnerability. "You're injured," she said, her voice soft but urgent as her hands hovered over his wound. A faint tremor betrayed her internal conflict, torn between logic and concern. "Just a scratch," Aiden said through gritted teeth, though the burn on his shoulder told a different story. "Nice work with the terminal." "You took a hit meant for me," Elyara said, her voice soft. "Why?" Aiden managed a lopsided grin. "Guess I'm just a sucker for glowing eyes." Elyara shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're reckless, Captain. But your courage is remarkable." She helped him to his feet, and together they made their way back to the ship, their bond forged stronger by the fire they had just endured. As the Valkyrie's edge lifted off, Aiden couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. The stakes were higher than ever, but with Elyara by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. As the Valkyrie's edge cleared the Osprek sector, the ship's hull still hummed faintly from the stress of the journey. Aiden rubbed his shoulder absently, the ache a reminder of how close they had come to disaster. The chaotic expanse of ion storms and rogue asteroid fields gave way to the serene vastness of open space, but Aiden couldn't shake the tension in his chest. Aiden Shaw slouched in the pilot's seat, his shoulder bandaged but still aching, as the tension in his muscles began to ease. Elyara stood nearby, her glowing eyes fixed on the artifact resting securely in the containment field. The holographic map it projected had dimmed, signaling their proximity to the sanctuary. "That's it," Elyara said softly, her voice carrying a rare note of reverence. "We're here." Aiden straightened, his gaze following hers to the viewport. A massive, ancient structure loomed ahead, its surface etched with intricate patterns that glowed faintly, as if alive. Towering spires jutted skyward, the low, resonant hum vibrating through the ship's hull like a pulse from an ancient heart. The sanctuary floated in orbit around a dying star, its golden light casting long shadows across the alien architecture. It was unlike anything Aiden had ever seen. "Looks welcoming," Aiden said, his tone tinged with sarcasm, though his awe was evident. "Do we knock, or does it just know we're coming?" "It will recognize the artifact," Elyara replied, her fingers brushing the edge of the containment field. "This place was built by my ancestors. It's one of the last remnants of our civilization." Aiden nodded, piloting the ship toward the sanctuary's docking bay. As they approached, the structure's gates opened silently, revealing a dimly lit interior. The ship settled with a hiss, and Aiden powered down the engines, his instincts still on high alert despite the calm. "Stay close," Elyara said as they disembarked, her tone more commanding than usual. "Wasn't planning on wandering off," Aiden replied, gripping his sidearm just in case. The sanctuary's interior was vast and echoing, its walls adorned with glowing symbols that seemed to pulse in time with the artifact. Elyara walked ahead, her movements deliberate and filled with purpose. Her glowing eyes flickered with an unspoken connection to the sanctuary, as if each step brought her closer to something she'd long sought but feared to find. Aiden followed, his eyes scanning their surroundings, the air thick with an energy that felt almost alive. "This place is giving me the creeps," he muttered. "It's ancient," Elyara said. "And powerful. The sanctuary is designed to protect the artifact, but it also tests those who bring it here." "Tests?" Aiden asked, his voice rising slightly. "What kind of tests?" Elyara stopped before a massive door, its surface rippling like liquid metal. "We're about to find out." The door parted with a sound like a sigh, revealing a circular chamber bathed in golden light. The air was warm and carried a faint, metallic tang, while the shimmering reflections on the walls seemed to ripple like waves on a still pond. In its center stood a pedestal, the same intricate patterns covering its surface. Elyara stepped forward, placing the artifact atop the pedestal. The instant it made contact, the chamber exploded with radiant light and cascading sound. Symbols danced across the walls in intricate, rhythmic patterns, while the deep, harmonic tone seemed to vibrate in Aiden's very bones, leaving him both awestruck and unsteady. The walls shimmered, the symbols shifting and rearranging, and the air hummed with a resonant energy that sent shivers down Aiden's spine. "Okay," Aiden said, taking a cautious step back. "This is officially weird." Elyara closed her eyes, her hands outstretched toward the artifact. The light around her intensified, and she seemed to glow brighter, as if the sanctuary was channeling its energy through her. Aiden could only watch, a mixture of awe and apprehension tightening his chest. Suddenly, the light dimmed, and Elyara's eyes snapped open. She turned to Aiden, her expression unreadable. "It's done," she said softly. "What's done?" Aiden asked, his hand still hovering near his weapon. "The sanctuary has accepted the artifact," Elyara explained. "It's safe now. And so are we." Aiden exhaled deeply, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. "Glad to hear it. But what happens next?" Elyara stepped closer, her glowing eyes meeting his. "The artifact's knowledge will be preserved here, protected until the time is right for my people to rebuild. It's more than just a relic, Aiden. It's hope." He nodded, the weight of her words settling over him. "And you? What about your people?" "We'll endure," Elyara said, her voice steady. Thanks to you. Aiden chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. I just flew the ship. You did the hard part. Don't underestimate your role, Captain, Elyara said, a rare smile gracing her lips. You risked everything for someone you barely knew. That's not nothing. Before Aiden could respond, a faint vibration rippled through the sanctuary. The golden light dimmed, and the massive door began to close. Elyara's gaze lingered on the artifact for a moment before she turned and motioned for Aiden to follow. As they boarded the Valkyrie's edge and prepared for departure, Aiden couldn't help but glance at Elyara. She seemed different, lighter, as if a burden she'd carried for ages had finally been lifted. Where to now? He asked, his hands on the controls. Elyara's smile was faint but genuine. Wherever the stars take us. The ship lifted off, leaving the sanctuary behind. As they accelerated into the vast expanse of space, Aiden felt a strange sense of calm. The mission was over, but something told him this was only the beginning of a new adventure, one he wouldn't trade for anything. Wherever the stars take us, Aiden echoed, a grin spreading across his face. As the ship surged forward into the void, Aiden's thoughts lingered on the perilous journey behind them. The memory of Elyara's glowing eyes, filled with determination, and the sanctuary's ancient power reminded him that some bonds, forged in fire, were stronger than the stars themselves.